Hi, everybody. Welcome. We'll be getting started in about 2 minutes so we can let others join the meeting. Thank you all who have joined us a little early today. Chris, David, you guys can see the screen?
We can see, and you'll see me as a participant as well under David Redekop, because that way I can see what the audience sees and
Perfect.
get distracted from looking at the snow outside.
Yeah. Snowing in April. Right.
While we're waiting for a few people, I'm going to show my age by showing you a little gadget I got here. But this might be interesting to some people. Do you know what this is?
Oh, wow. That is so cool.
If I take it apart, if I take off the case, it is just a USB-C iPhone.
Yeah.
But these guys wanted to appeal to the people
BlackBerry
that
market.
used to think that the BlackBerry was irreplaceable. And so now, if you're looking for that physical keyboard, it is actually possible. So it's kind of neat, but I'm really bummed that they didn't just grab the actual BlackBerry design, because what was beautiful about the BlackBerry design is that just ever so slightly curved range of keys. These are flat and straight. So if you guys don't want to, those are who actually have muscle memory of the BlackBerry keys, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy. But if you like the tactile aspect, then it might be worth your while.
It's awesome.
Nothing to do with ransomware whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
But if I was a bad guy and I wanted to develop ransomware, I would bake it into the fact that an iPhone will blindly trust a USB-C human input device like a keyboard. It does not ask for any validation. It doesn't say, do you trust this USB-C device? It just assumes that it's a keyboard. And I'm surprised that it hasn't been a bigger alarm all around. But it probably will be as soon as someone finds a way to abuse it.
That's right. That's right. Okay, we'll be starting momentarily, folks. All right. Thank you very much for all of you attending, for joining us on another Inside the Matrix webinar with CriticaMatrix. And today, amazing guests and featuring amazing technology from our friends at ADAMnetworks. Going to start with a quick introduction. I am Nim Nadajarah. I'm one of the managing partners in the CISO CriticaMatrix. We like to host these events called Inside the Matrix that share technology insights as well as thought leadership on, how we can stay together and do better as security leaders in the industry. With me today, I've got David from ADAMnetworks and Chris, who is another industry CIO. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their backgrounds before we jump right into the webinar. So, David, over to you first.
Cool. Thank you, Nim. And thanks, everybody, for joining. I know you're getting a lot of invitations all over the place. So the fact that you are here is something that we appreciate. And our attempt will be to make sure it's worth your while. I'm David Redekop, and I'm the founder and CEO of ADAMnetworks. And we're a software as a service, a SaaS company focused in the area of cybersecurity, and specifically zero trust connectivity, which focuses on the egress side of network traffic.
Thank you, David. Chris, over to you.
Yes, my name is Chris Kradich. I am currently working in networking and cybersecurity here on the customer side. I have been a customer of David's for many years at a few different companies here. So I've only recently met Nim, but very happy to meet you. And I can see why you guys are in each other's orbit here. So happy to join and hopefully share my insight here.
Thank you, Chris. There's nothing that makes things more real than hearing the voice of a victim. And, I really appreciate you being comfortable and willing to share with us so we can all learn from you as well. As we jump into this, before I hand it over to David, the one thing as security leaders we always talk about is technology. And I want to shift this conversation a little bit away from the technology itself and talk a little bit about resiliency. Because what we tend to forget is the company only has a finite amount of money it can run with before we physically run out of money. That's called cash flow, right? And the recovery time objectives that we establish in our incident response plans and our disaster recovery plans or business continuity plans all need to measure against how quickly do we get the business back operating such that the cash flow can keep going, keep making widgets, keep selling products online, keep fulfilling orders, keep, doing what we do that generates revenue so that we can get back into conducting business without being fully shut down, right? So, and this is important because that's what ransomware does. It completely immobilizes your company. So before we jump in, I'm going to kick off a little poll. We like these webinars to be interactive. You're going to see something pop up on your screen. Go ahead and type in. This poll is a simple question that says, when you hear ransomware, what's the first word that comes to your mind? Okay. If you can't see the poll or there's challenges with the poll, let me know in the chat or in the Q&A as they are open. The reactions are also open, so you can raise your hands, you can give thumbs up, thumbs down, hearts, claps. Compromise, Bitcoin, phishing, fear, hostage. Ooh. Some very scary words. Thank you for those who participated. So David, over to you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing a slide deck. Did you want to throw up the first slide? Because what I think we'll do is I'll quickly start with an experience that I had that I don't want you to experience. And Chris can corroborate this, and we've gone through extensive detail onto what happened, but I still don't see it. Should I be seeing it?
Don't see it, eh?
No.
That's strange. Okay.
I'll go ahead and start anyway while you bring it up. So guys, it's Friday night, your worst day that could start like this. Friday night, you've got your briefcase ready, you got your backpack ready, you got your winter coat on, and you're ready to leave. But all of a sudden, your phone buzzes and your entire network is locked, and a red skull blinks on every screen with a big ransom demand. And your data, it's gone or soon to be leaked, and your business is going to be grinding to a halt. Now, ransomware costs hit $813 million in 2024, according to Chainalysis, with over 75% of organizations globally that have been hit at least once. And so to me, this is frighteningly close to home because I've been through this in the role of a defender. And what we also find is that it's for those that haven't been through it, is that it's a fallout that is really, really hard to see in advance. Because what happens as a result of a ransomware incident is that customers abandon ship as trust erodes extremely quickly. and then operations end up stalling because the supply chains are broken. We're talking about all kinds of interconnectedness with the supply chain. If anybody's ever worked in manufacturing or in services, we are more interconnected now than we've ever been. And then legal fines will pile up from data breaches, and then reputational scars that last years. This is not I'm not attempting to sell based on fear, because that's not my way of operating. But by the same token, not sharing with you what actually has happened to people that we've defended would be a disservice. Now, the average downtime currently is 21 days. 21-day of complete halt of a business. This is according to Sophos State of Ransomware 2024 report. And I know some of the principal security researchers there that do a phenomenal job. Now, really the question is for any business owner, any stakeholder, or anybody who carries the responsibility of the security side of things, is can we survive that? That is the big question. Now, I'm going to jump to the attack chain exposed.
Just to jump in
unless you
here,
want to
David,
ask.
real quick.
Yes.
Everyone, I shared a link to the slide deck. We seem to have some technical difficulties this morning. So in the chat, you'll see a link to the deck. If you just click on it, you'll be able to follow along with us because David is jumping into slide 2. Slide 3 of our presentation here, okay? All
Perfect.
right.
Thank you, Nim. Now, Nim, did you also have a poll ready to?
I
I'm curious to see how
do.
many have been hit with ransomware or have been in the role of a responder or been hit in their own organizations. There you go. Have you been impacted by ransomware? If you look at the poll, I would be really interested in finding out what this particular audience's experience has been like.
So we're sitting at 71% no, 29% yes so far. Or 22 yes, 78 no. So mostly on the impact side. Let's run another poll real quick here to see how you feel about have you ever had to recover a business through the experience of having felt ransomware? So we got about 63 yes so far to 10 responses.
Okay, so we have a number of responders here in this group.
Yeah, very interactive group. Very cool.
Yeah.
They're sitting at about 50-50 between recovering as well as not having recovered, which is interesting, right?
Right. Well, that's awesome. So hats off to you guys. I don't know how many of you, we don't have a poll ready for this, I don't think, Nim, but I'm also curious, those that have recovered from ransomware or have been in a defender role, how long they've been in that role. Because it's a huge turnover role. It is extremely stressful. Chris can probably tell you more about how stressful it was from his side. But let me tell you what it is from a defenders that's hired for defending. It was literally 22 to 23-hour days continuously, as long as your body didn't give up, as long as you felt like you could still cognitively take the next step, you took the next step, right? So Chris, why don't you tell us what it's like on the customer side or on the inside as opposed to the external defender side?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've been a part of multiple incidents. 2 were more hands-on and were things that David and the team were involved in. It's a very you feel very exposed. It's a lot like it's a similar experience to having your car stolen, right? You feel like you feel violated. It's interesting because you end up having to call an IR team and follow a procedure that may or may not be very well fleshed out, and you might have to knock some dust off of that and update it as you go. It's a very emotional time. It's definitely not something I would hope people get to experience multiple times here. But for me, lightning has struck a few times, and one of the positives that have come out of it is really finding a passion for the cybersecurity piece. So when I had come up previously, it was mostly kind of general sysadmin of I liked being in charge of the office I was in and helping it run smoothly. But some of the very early impacts in my career are you can do everything right as far as you know, but if the person in charge isn't making the right decisions, it can impact everybody. So that's kind of how I feel like a lot of the peers that I speak to get involved in this too, is kind of taking that best practices and wanting to be really good at what you do and share a lot of the knowledge here. So I'm really grateful to help. I've met a lot of great people along the way. But yeah, it is definitely a scary time. You tend to have to be very exposed, and there's new people that you trust coming into your systems and checking it out, and you don't really know what internal systems you can trust. It's really one of those Mike Tyson moments of you get to see what you're made of when you get punched in the face here. So yeah.
Fun fact, folks on the call, the standard business leader answer is, it hasn't happened to us yet. It hasn't. I mean, we spend all this money on security. What's the point? We'll be okay. But here's some interesting numbers. Think of a number that you think are the number of ransomware victims today on April 10th at 11:16 a.m. EDT. How many victims do you think there are already just today? So since midnight last night, when it became April 10th, there's 15 ransomware victims reported. We're on the 10th day of the month in April. This month already, there have been 192 ransomware victims who have raised their hand and said, hey, I'd like to report this. There's a problem, right? And we're only in the 10th day of the fourth month of the year. So technically only one quarter has finished. And there's 2,580 victims who've already raised their hand and said, hey, we got ransomware. These are real numbers. These are 15 businesses today that are going, uh-oh, we're having an OSM. Do you know what that is, Chris? OSM? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It's a family-friendly show, right? So
exactly, family-friendly show. That's right. That's right.
I'm going to try something here. If I do a screen share, does it work? It's not coming up, is it?
Try it out.
Okay, so I just did a share my browser.
Yeah, there you go.
Is it working? Oh, sweet. Okay. Well, in that case, we're just going to use this. I know you've already shared the deck, but this way we can stay on track.
Yeah.
So is it okay if I jump to the next one, Nim?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the attack chain really is not something super complicated if you think about it. And since we have a range of never been victims yet to having been victims and having defenders in the call, I'm going to take a moment just to describe that it really is about being a methodical process where it isn't just a single bullet that hits an organization. It usually starts with either credentials that have been phished or stolen, or with an email attachment or a link. And today, the most common one is a link that leads you down a path to begin with. And so that's how the door cracks open to begin with. Once they've got the smallest footprint inside of a network, then it's about lateral movement, where there's a silent method of getting from the device that had an attachment run or clicked on a link or had a PowerShell script run to then move to other devices on the network. That's when privilege escalation happens, where now they find weaknesses in the system to become an administrator. So now they can own the keys and also deploy a remote command and control foothold. So now, even if a computer gets rebooted because it became unstable or someone saw something weird going on, so they're like, well, I'm going to shut down for today and come back tomorrow, that remote command and control is then very, very persistent. There's so many tools, even in the open source world. I've been playing around for years with tools that are literally adversary emulation training tools that are now being used by the bad guys. And so finally, when they've done enough recon, then they do a payload on the most valuable asset. So that would be your file servers, your Active Directory controllers, or even your web servers, your email servers, wherever there's any data, including in advance backups, if the backup system is accessible, to encrypt the backups in order to make it more difficult. So that is usually what exfiltration starts, when encryption happens, when the extortion process starts. And it's not until someone's work is disrupted that an incident response is triggered. And that's really, when everybody thinks they're prepared, everybody's got some kind of an incident response plan, even if it's just a Gartner or an Infotech templated incident response plan. But that is when, what was the expression you used, that Mike Tyson? You have a good plan until you get hit a punch in the nose.
Everyone's good until you get punched in the face.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's when involuntary disclosure happens. And in fact, Nim and I have a couple of resources that we use, like ransomlook.io. If you take a look at the recent post just from today, I bet you the first page is just from today. Look at that. These are all of the known ransom victims just from this morning. Now, mind you, it's already afternoon in some of these time zones, or evening in Japan, but this is just from today. And these are just the ones that have been discovered today, because this particular group is following just a few key ransom groups. But ransomware.live is another one that showcases different victims, but also a little bit of a graph on who's who. This to me is frightening, because even though the stats are showing that 2024 is a little bit down in ransom payments, the amount of ransom victims has gone up quite a bit. So just
now
goes
remember,
to show,
this doesn't
yes,
have to be necessarily self-reported, right, David? This is
yes,
also
correct.
the threat actors claiming on the dark web, and these sites having dark web sensors that are saying, hey, Nim didn't say, he's breached, but his company's on here already.
Yeah.
So your secret's out.
To that point, I'm not going to say which one, but one of the guys in this list from yesterday is someone that I know who technology supplier is. And I reached out to the technology supplier. The technology supplier reached out to their client, which is on this list, and they were shocked because some of the executives didn't even know yet. So this kind of information spreads so incredibly fast that we can't hide our head in the sand and expect that it won't happen. The only answer, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is to be preventative to begin with before it gets to that point. So am I good to proceed to the next slide here, Nim?
Yeah.
Okay. So why do traditional defenses collapse? And this is because the traditional firewalling systems that are in place are basically just speed bumps, because the bad guys can do recon work well enough in advance to find out what some threats are that can be used that are not yet known, because traditional tools are all about looking for behavior patterns, looking for known threats to block them, even using AI. So now that we have AI doing the defense, the offenders also use AI to do offense, right?
That's
and
right.
so it just ends up being an AI versus AI game. And then we have this fundamental issue that we're trusting by default still, and that is really what our where things break down, is when we trust by default if we don't know what a resource is. And again, 66% of ransomware, depending on how broad and what range of surveys you go through, are ones that come in via email to begin with, and it's almost always via a link. And that's why it's so challenging. So we've now spent 20 minutes to talk about the bad, and some of you guys are like, okay, we've seen this before. Let's talk about how you can shut this down with the approach of zero trust connectivity. And this is all about verifying every user, every device, and every network destination. If the source or destination is not verifiable, it's just not allowed. In traditional lingo, Chris and I would call it default deny all. And back in the early internet days on Unix, that's what we did, default deny all. That is one of the steps that was not very practical, but I would argue that today it's practical enough that it just needs to be done. And I'm sure Chris will have some thoughts on this too, but the next one is segmentation to limit lateral movement. Now, what's interesting is the case where Chris and I got to know each other, there was already heavy network segmentation, very heavy network segmentation. I think we had like something like 20 VLANs in total, 20 networks.
I think a little more than that, but yes, yes.
So the issue there was network segmentation, but no constraint. So one of the funniest things I ever read was a meme that said, the most permanent thing is a temporary firewall rule, because we temporarily say, allow segment 1 to go to segment 2, allow the green zone to the red zone, and then we forget about the rule. So segmentation is one thing, but then actually putting proper constraints in place. Honoring sovereign data custody in this slide point is all about not doing deep packet inspection for a bunch of reasons. Number one, it breaks user trust, right? We're all about drinking our own lemonade, right? I use the tool that I'm talking about today, and so does Chris and Nim, because there is no packet inspection that breaks down the SSL packet. So when I log into my bank, my credentials are not being decrypted by our tools. It's not being intercepted anywhere along the path. That's what we mean by honoring sovereign data custody. And the result is that even in the system that does the protection, there can be no breach, right? So that's a big part of it. So this approach of zero trust connectivity basically stops 99% of attacks before they even start. Because if you follow a typical attack chain, remember they need multiple steps in order to get a foothold. They never established to get a foothold to begin with.
So, David, Chris, what's interesting, when I speak to CIOs and CISOs, one of the things we talk about is, well, what is the most impactful thing that's happening to your people, which is resulting in negative output or lack of productivity or lack of efficiency? And what really comes up, but it's not the lack of tech that's affecting our ability to respond and pay attention, right? It's the lack of focusing on people, resiliency, and the execution.
Yeah.
And this is really important, because nowhere in any incident that I have ever seen have the team risen to the adrenaline of the situation, right? With ransomware, or any sort of cyber incident for that matter, panic ensues. There's a lot of pressure. And because we practiced it sometimes, but not often enough to be really good at it, we're not sure what to do next. I'm going to run a quick poll before we run into the next set of slides. I want to hear from the audience what you think the most important step is when fighting ransomware. Is it finding patient zero, firing the employee whose fault it is, calling your insurance company, containment? What is the number one situation that you think is most important there? Because amongst the chaos that falls when ransomware hits and panic ensues, it's remembering how to respond and how well you've practiced your incident response plan. You lowered to the last best training you recall. That's just human nature. Military uses that philosophy. Law enforcement uses that philosophy. That's just the way it is. It comes down to making sure that we've rehearsed, reviewed, and revised iteratively how we're going to respond to the situation. But 89% of people think containment is the best thing to do, and absolutely. Because once you slow the panic down and you have your hand around the situation, you've established control. Once you establish control, you respond how you control how you respond. And I think that's a good segue into the next slide there, David.
Actually,
Awesome.
if I can interject here, if I can back up a little bit, maybe
Yeah.
provide a little bit of a hands-on experience from what I had seen here from the few that I've been a part of. The piece about data sovereignty, I think hits home for a lot of countries with rules that are ever evolving too about privacy concerns, and you hit on the piece about not doing the deep packet inspection, and I think that gets understated sometimes too, because when you're in or when you have a system like this in place, I think you take it for granted, but how much fewer resources and power it takes to do this compared to doing the deep packet inspection. So we are able to
Right.
have a very noticeably different set of power requirements, cooling requirements.
Right.
So there is a non-technical, non-business, like environmental impact, like positive impact of taking the technical out of it. If you just say that this is on equal terms of other protection suites, there is I think the last time we measured it, it was 60%. It took 60% less compute resources, 60% less power generated, heat generated, which means we're able to set our data centers to a different temperature, right? The AC doesn't have to work as hard. There is a big impact. We can have smaller battery backups that give us similar runtime. And those are, things that non-technical people can understand. On top of the privacy and the data sovereignty being such a big talking point that we're that we're rehashing constantly. I think there's other pieces to that are really important. Actually, if you can go back one more slide here too,
Yes.
there is a very, I guess, near and dear to me. So the most recent impact, we were in the middle of deploying the ADAM one solution in the environment here, and we had noticed that when we did get hit, just the appetite of the business wanted to move at a certain pace, so we were moving things as they were. The team had the focus to, and the endpoints that were protected behind ADAM were not impacted by the breach. So the breach was very targeted. It impacted a bunch of devices, but there was a very clear set of devices that was protected behind the ADAM infrastructure. So the impact was a lot less that time around. Personally, I was a lot more prepared to hit the button here too. Nim had kind of hinted at it as well, as the adrenaline hits you differently when you have been punched in the face before, and you have a good plan and you have the support. So I've been very fortunate to have the non-technical support to say, okay, let's get something in place of if we do get hit while we're not fully prepared for it, we have that big red button in response and can basically go from identifying it to containment within, it was hours. It was way before the IR team had boots on the ground here. It was shorter than the call with the IR team to just explain to them what was going on. It's something that can happen where containment happens very, very quickly. Even the first time that I had met David too, that was, we had to replace a bunch of infrastructure, but comparing it to other breaches, we still did that before an IR team could fly out and have boots on the ground too. So I think there's another piece to this of just how well it works and not requiring an agent that just gives you that containment right away. And I think there is such a huge value in that relief of pressure, right? When you have that adrenaline going, when you can say, okay, we're contained. Let's collect our thoughts, get everybody on the team up to speed in the same spot, and you can have those discussions. It was a very different experience versus the emotional situation we were in the first time around. So I think that gets understated. I think there's a lot of technical discussions that happen, but on the customer side, there are other things that are noticeable that I want to make sure that get brought up to. So
Thank you,
you,
Chris.
Chris. Yeah, I appreciate that very much. It's very real. Like what Chris and I've gone through is very real, and now we want to share with everybody some good practices. I'll jump to some very specific things that I think will be of most value to you in the audience today. And this is very generic. Okay, there's tons of standards. There's massive amounts of templates from analysts that can be followed. But here is the generic approach on how to do an audit on what your attack surface is like today in an organization between 10 people and 1,000 or many thousands, because at the end of the day, it's very asymmetric. The good guys have to patch every hole. The bad guys need to find only one. And that asymmetry is what puts a lot of weight on the defenders. There's some kind of a semblance here to the order, but the first thing is making sure that all online accounts are passkey protected. Now, if you're wondering why passkey specifically, it's because it's the only technology that is actually phishing proof should your users somehow end up on a phishing site, right? If you use MFA tokens or SMS for two-factor authentication, it is now very trivial for the bad guys to set a proxy infrastructure so that when you enter that MFA token, it gets stolen mid-flight. In fact, if any of you are interested, the author of Have I Been Pwned, Troy Hunt, was hit just a couple of weeks ago in his own MailChimp account. Here's a guy who's lived, like he's my age. He's lived in the defense industry 30 years like I have. How does a guy like that get caught? And it's because MailChimp's MFA token was your number tumbler. And so passkeys get past that. Now, YubiKeys are physical passkeys. So one of the things that I don't like to do is I like to have everything electronic. But when it comes to keys, I physically, if you want to compromise my resources, you're going to have a hammer to knock me out and then grab my keys. Not that I want to give you any ideas or anything, but so that's the number one for a reason, because by the way, if your email address is on Have I Been Pwned like mine is, it means that there's already information on the dark web about you, about credentials that you used on the sites that are showing where you've been pwned. What that means is most likely your account is getting hit nonstop. Your Microsoft, your Google account, nonstop from bots. These are not even human operated anymore, but somebody scraped the dark web for all of these credentials, ran a little Claude AI request to say, write me a script that tries to log in from all of these proxies so it doesn't look like it's coming from, a data center somewhere, and see if you can log in, and then report back when you have a success. And then the script just runs away. And if you take a look at your Microsoft login attempts, your Google, you'll see them just continuously. This is the reason why. This is the number one step for you to take. Next one is to check with your team if you have any and all of your high value assets segmented. That means your database server, your web server, your file server, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem doesn't matter. In many places, in many environments, the cloud is just an extension of a data center anyway. So the same kind of security applies there. Unless you're completely, totally modern and building cloud infrastructure from ground zero, then it's a different kind of a security game. But in most cases, this is what you need. Are your users able to reach typical sites that are reported at places like Fish Tank? So here's a good one to try. Just go to fishtank.org and just take a look at all of these websites. Let me just pick one at random here and try and go there. Now, what you want to be able to do is have a completely usable internet experience, but the moment you end up your device tries to go to a website that is not known or already tagged as malware by some kind of threat intelligence, this is what you want to make sure you're being protected from. Are your C2, that means command and control, are they reachable when DNS is not being used? This is kind of a new area of concern for a lot of organizations because traditionally the only IP addresses that are blocked are the ones that are known to be bad. So bad guys just move around and even move to residential internet service provider IP addresses on devices that they've been able to hijack and use as proxies. So all that to say is ask this question of your security team. Are those IP addresses that are listed in modern day threats reachable? Are circumvention tools able to be run? The easiest way to test this is to just use standard Onion router. In fact, if using Brave browser, you can literally just go to the file menu and choose New Private Window with Tor. If that is able to open for you, then you have a problem. If the siphon tool is able to work, it's a problem. If a VPN is able to run from your network, that's a problem. Right? And then finally, do you have any public-facing services that are unconstrained? Like, are you directly offering your internal portal or your client login in an unconstrained way without a web application firewall, something in front of it? These are very generic questions for an initial attack surface assessment.
You know,
you have anything you want to add, Nim?
It is best practice. Like a lot of organizations with moving to Windows 11 are trying to standardize on Edge as their enterprise browser, and sort of disabling Safari, Chrome, and Penguin browser and all the Opera and all the other options that are available for people, because if you have too many doors that people can leave through, it also means there's doors that people can come through.
Yeah.
Right. And this is something very important to consider as part of your sort of endpoint security strategy as well. Yeah.
Yep.
I have a question, Chris,
Yes.
that I think is on the minds of some of the folks in the audience. When you experienced your cyber incident, what was the reaction from your executives? And share a little bit. We've got some senior leaders on the call with us today too. Share your approach that you had taken in terms of making them aware of what security and controls you had in place, and then how they responded once ransomware hit, and then there was ADAM in certain areas and not in others, right? Just from a CFO lens and from a CEO lens, maybe.
Yeah, I think there was definitely a moment of I told you so. Like I've been ringing the bell of we need to talk about this and do it here. I've been very lucky at the most recent one where that team is very open to having discussions and is very open to being realistic about what their appetite is for risk. I think that's something that was missing from some of my earlier incidents. Is there was a lot of emotional response of when somebody in that role of a CFO, CEO, who's in that kind of that leadership decision-making role, is not being honest and being upfront about what, whether advertently or inadvertently, of what they've been comfortable with risk-wise. It's very different. So the most recent one, I was very lucky. We had a lot of good conversations here. There was a very realistic amount of appetite and what they were willing to do and how quickly they were able to change. And it was a really good discussion. It's interesting. Speaking with, I have more context now in IR teams, not necessarily that I've physically worked with or been firsthand with, but I think something we hit on earlier has been very much on my mind here too about default denial. I think there was a big push for that yeah, 10 or 15 years ago of like, I think the right philosophy came out of that's the right way to do it. And we were really missing the key tools to explain that. And this kind of works back into the question you had asked too of the biggest question I get is how can we do this without impacting people the least, right? So combining risk appetite with um, um, how much we're willing to do and make changes on and potentially impact day-to-day deliverables too is I think a tool like this gives us the first time we have a realistic way of doing the default denial that doesn't have to be supported by somebody who's very technical. I think there's a lot of people on the team that supports our tools today that are not that don't need to be very technical to make these tools work. The way the dashboard is kind of evolved and just the way that the principles are at work here is it's a very straightforward thought process too. So I think that also aids in having really good conversations with CFOs, CEOs, those kind of high level, typically not technical people. I think that was a very different, the first kind of big breach that I was front and center for. The CEO and CFO thought we were very protected by the current position we were in. So having the emotional response of this security you felt for the company had been around for a very long time. The security you've felt for the entire time you've been here has been falsely propped up, and
Right.
it's kind of a hit twice. So I think this most recent one was a lot better because we were able to have those conversations earlier. And I think that's the biggest thing, especially for the audience who has not necessarily been a part of one, is having these discussions that you're having here ahead of time helps get everybody on the same page. When you get hit, you very quickly find out who was truthful on their resumes here, because you end up having to get really good at foundational IT items, and also you find out real quick who works very well under pressure.
It's interesting. And we have one more slide left to go through content that David's going to share. But the one thing that was consistent on vocabulary that I get from CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and CIOs and CISOs post breach is the word betrayal. And it's because emotionally, the executive team and the board felt betrayed, that they were being sold a security posture that appeared robust but failed them. And the CISO feels betrayed because they're like, I thought my team had my back. And when rubber hit the road, they froze. Mm-hmm. And somewhere in the middle is, I've always been saying I needed help, but I never got the budget. And yeah, he asked for money or she asked for money, but we never had a problem. What was there seemed to be working. I think it just wasn't set up correctly. And it can become very toxic very quickly. So this is an evolving dynamic situation where now there's the stress and strain of the incident, the stress and strain of the recovery, and now we add to this the emotional questionability of trust, right? And everyone's humans are mentally working through this together. So our goal as technology leaders should be, when this situation happens, how do we approach the situation in the most de-escalated posture as possible? And I believe that one of those cases is, again, you can only control what you contain. And if we have containment in place, now the question is eradication. Let's talk about who's failed you. We can do a postmortem later, but we can sort of calm the nerves of all the humans around us until it's just all AI agent driven and cyborg responded command centers for breach. So thank you for sharing that, Chris. David, back to you. Let's hit the last slide. And while David's going to the last slide, folks, the Q&A section is open. Um, Go ahead, fire
Yeah.
in your questions, ask us. We'll be more than happy to address some of these in the last few minutes of our webinar today.
Cool.
Over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Nim. We have two more quick slides, but actually, let me just change the order them because I really want to talk about this one here first, which is the proper password hygiene and password management. I talked about passkeys earlier. It seems like it's a complicated technology, and it's going to take a little bit to wrap your head around it, but it is worth it. So get a password manager that allows you to do cross-platform passkey management. Do not use Apple iCloud's passkeys. Do not use Windows passkeys. It needs to be
There's some
an
people on
abstract.
the webinar, David. I know they use Chrome to store their passwords. I know who
Please,
you are.
please don't. Please don't. And I'm asking you for your own protection. It's like me asking my son, please don't do that to yourself. And I really mean that because ultimately that's going to be the weakest form of password management. It is not a free option, although the freest there is. There are some open source solutions that allow you to do self-hosting. And I don't think I've mentioned any specific password manager here, but look for one that gives you the ability to have cross-platform passkey management. I personally use 1Password. It is not that it matters, but it is a Canadian company. Every once in a while, when we mention that, it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. And they do store their vaults in a very secure way. It's been independently verified by security researchers, and they haven't had any incidents, right, in the long time that they've been around. So there is something about that matters. So that's not me saying that they're the only ones, but they were my choice based on a very careful consideration about what vendor to use. And the team-based approach works really quite well, where you can create team-based vaults. So you can actually have passkey authentication with sites where you have to have a shared login. At least that shared login is now constrained to the vault. So it's really, really important to consider that. Your cloud accounts themselves should be protected with a physical YubiKey. It is a passkey, but it's a hardware, or think of it like a sovereign key, as opposed to a virtual inside the password manager. And then just become religious, literally, about making sure that you only allow the password manager to fill in password field. Because one of the things that you can do to avoid falling into the trap of a phishing link is if the password manager fills it in for you. If it doesn't, that should be a red flag. They've changed their URL, and now you want to investigate that. Check with your buddy, check with your security team on whether that's a legit site or not. Okay, so that's password manager. I can't pronounce this enough, how important it is, because that is something that gives an attack surface to the entire world. So any bad guy of any of the billions of people on the planet will have access to your online accounts, and this is the way you protect them. Now let's switch to protecting inside of your walls, and this is where zero trust principles apply. We can start small and then scale fast as you're able to. We have a product called DNS Harmony that aggregates DNS threat intelligence in real time. In fact, we make this available completely free of charge in non-commercial usage. So you can apply this to any number of existing router platforms. So DNS Harmony is about asking Cloudflare and asking Clean Browsing and asking your Pi-hole and asking Quad9. And if any one of them say a destination's unsafe, then that destination's not allowed. So again, DNS Harmony, it also provides you for resilience, right? So if any one of them is down, it pulls them out of the pool of resolvers and then uses the remaining. So you get resilience, you get security that's aggregated in real time. And then there's a technology we call Don't Talk to Strangers, where any IP address that didn't first get started with an allowed DNS query by policy is considered a stranger. Microsoft calls their deployment ZT DNS or Zero Trust DNS. ZTDNS is basically the same approach as what we do with Don't Talk to Strangers, but it's Microsoft doing it on the endpoint, and we do it at the gateway, so that an agent isn't required for devices that are always in the same place. Think of your printers, of your security cameras, of your IoT and your OT networks, right? And then this is how you prevent lateral movement. that is disallowed except by verified source. So if a red teamer walks into my office and uses my Ethernet jack and thinks that they can enumerate the network and directly attack the domain controller, it's going to look like it's crickets from a network perspective. There's nothing there for them to see, and that's really what you want to do to prevent it. And then that's just an example of how you can apply role appropriate policies to the network. So that's our presentation today. I hope it was of value.
Let's open it up to some questions. Please, you can use the React in Microsoft Teams. Let us know how you felt the overall topic was. Thumbs up and heart if you really loved it. But please do ask some. If there's anything top of mind, asking some questions, because this is a session for you. Essentially, Inside the Matrix sessions are all about helping provide sort of insights into how we as tech leaders can excel at what we do and continue protecting our business. While I'm waiting for questions, some of the key takeaways, think about resiliency. Proactive is more better than reactive. Nobody likes chasing a mouse, right? If you have a mouse in your house, you're trying to contain the mouse to a certain area so that you can eradicate it. Trap and release or eradicate. Let's be nice to animals, but at the same time, the one conclusion I will say is there's no car chase that I've ever seen on any of those YouTube shorts or Instagram that ended successfully. It's usually multiple people injured, and that really is what traditional cyber defense is. It is a high-speed chase to find all the things and then fix all the things, and it usually doesn't go as planned. Here, the objective is to bring sort of order to chaos by saying, hey, like we've got this barricaded in, we're going to fix this situation here, and then kind of bring things back into operations, right? Think of resiliency and recovery time. The faster you can bring the business back up is better. Keep doing your tabletop exercises. You're only ever going to be as good as your last practice. NBA players will tell you the same thing, right? So without those simulations, your team is not going to know what to do. And keep in the back of your mind the word betrayal. At the end of the day, when emotions are high, this is the word that seems to fly around the most. Let's try to avoid that situation as much as possible. All righty. No questions, I guess. David and Chris, like you nailed it. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who attended today. It really means a lot to us. You will get an email with a link to the recording. If you have any questions that you want to ask privately to myself or David, or we didn't put Chris's email up, but if you want to speak, business to business, tech leader to tech leader, we'll be happy to introduce you to Chris privately, and you can have a conversation with him as well about how he kind of got through the technical, emotional, and physical challenges of not dealing with ransomware once, but twice, obviously at two different places in his career. Awesome.
He didn't mention that he had become he had given birth, or his wife had given birth rather, around the time of the first incident too.
It always happens at the worst
time. That added a lot to the stress, right?
that was a big year for me. Yeah, that was interesting. I was very happy you got to meet them too. So Thank you very much for the time today. I'm always happy to talk about it. We could be here all day. So
right, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.